Hey kids, welcome to the end of 2021. How's it going? Come on in, grab some hot chocolate, some sugar cookies, um, candy canes. Does anyone like candy canes? I was thinking about this the other day and I was like, the only candy canes that I've ever enjoyed have been the ones where they're not the peppermint flavor, but they're the other flavors, and they usually come in the sticks and, have, like, a berry flavor or something. Those are pretty good. I was trying to remember where I got those from, and I wanna say maybe at school? I don't know. So anyway, I am here today to talk about my favorite things from 2021. It was a very strange year. I've kind of ended this year in a weird place, which I think probably a lot of other people can relate to. And so I wanted to try to do something maybe not necessarily positive, but just to celebrate the things that I enjoyed this year, and maybe end with some thoughts for next year. Although I don't know that I have anything really groundbreaking to say. I think I used up all my wisdom on my turning 40, my birthday stream, but yeah, I've just had a lot of existential dread lately, and I don't know that that's going to get any better. So I figured, why not? Why not compile a list of my favorite things and just try to have fun and chill with everyone for a little bit today? So let's get into it. I, of course, created a PowerPoint to help me out. Let me see here. There we go. So we've got my favorite things from 2021. We're going to talk about food and beverage, books, video games, TV shows, and movies. And then, as I mentioned, if I have anything that comes to mind for 2022, I'll say that towards the end. So, this is a quick section, but I always love discovering new products that make my life amazing. And this year, I may have discovered these last year, but I don't think I like said anything about it. But this year, these snacks have been my favorite thing. So it's the Daily Crave, and they have these Beyond Puffs. I don't know why vegan things are always beyond, but here we are. But these little snacks are made from red lentils and black beans. They actually have a lot of fiber and they're fairly filling, but they're also quite tasty. So it's a nice, crunchy, kind of salty, savory snack. They have like 4 flavors and they're all really good. So I highly recommend these if you see them anywhere. And then my real discovery this year was Hoplark. So I don't know why. I think all of you know I've had to be gluten free now for a while. I used to be really, really into beer, and I have lately just been craving beer and missing it like crazy. So somehow when I was shopping, I discovered this Hoplark water and hop tea, and it's made with hops, but it's gluten free. There's no alcohol in it. So it just kind of gives you a beer like taste with either paired with a tea or with a sparkling water. And it's just been wonderful. Their teas, they have this one flavor made with chamomile. So that one's caffeine free because y'all know I'm also caffeine sensitive. Just such a fun life I have. So this one's been great. They do have other flavors that are paired with like green, black, or white tea, which I have tried, and they're quite good. But usually I just stick to the chamomile to keep it chill. And I actually have some today for this stream, so I'll crack that open. But it's really nice because especially if you're trying not to drink, or you don't want to drink, or you're like me and you're missing like a beer kind of hops experience, it's super nice. It's just great. And like they only have like the tea only has 3 ingredients. It's the hops, the chamomile, and what else is in it? Oh, carbonated water. So It's nice because it's not full of a bunch of crap. It's just quite refreshing and wonderful. So again, if you see those, you can order them online. They're not cheap, so for me, it's just like a treat once in a while, but you can order cases of it online. But it's just been, like, the best thing in the world for me to just have a treat and kind of scratch that itch without having to, like, drink alcohol or, I think there's only 1 gluten-free beer that I've been able to find locally, and it's really expensive, and it's, not easy to get a hold of, so plus I don't wanna actually I was thinking about it, I'm like, "2021, how do you not be drunk all the time?" That's my that's my catchphrase for the year. So this has been nice for me to kind of, like, feel that I'm doing something relaxing without actually being alcohol. Moving on. Oh, yes, and I, don't have a brand for these, but my local store has mango gummy bears, and I just have to say, it's the most amazing invention ever created by man, and if you see them anywhere, I highly recommend it. They're so flavorful and just delicious, and I love them so much, so if you're a big fan of gummy candy like I am, mango gummy bears, the way to go. All right. I'm very excited to talk about books. As you all know, in the Discord server, we have an active book club. So I've read a lot of books through there. And then I've also discovered the joy of audiobooks this year. I use the Libby app, which can connect with your local library system and helps you to check out books. Whether or not you can whether or not you have a library card, basically you can get a library card via Libby just using your phone number. This is in the US, of course. I don't know if it's available in other countries, but it's just been such a savior for me this year because they have a ton of books, like way more books than I would have expected. And they have a lot of audiobooks. And I've had a really hard time reading the last few years. I'm just having different like cognitive issues that makes reading and like concentrating on a book difficult. And it sucks because I love to read. I always have. And so I really wanted to, not only read the books for book club, but I also just wanted to like start reading for pleasure again in general. And I have other books that I've been wanting to catch up on. And so I've been using the Libby app to check those books out from the library, and they've had so many audiobooks. And so I can just I've sort of replaced podcasts, I guess, with audiobooks. And I'll listen to them while I cook or while I clean or if I go for a walk or whatever it is. So it's been wonderful. And the best part is that I got to read a bunch of really cool books this year. So Iron Widow, I'm very excited because we're actually doing this one for book club for January. So I'm gonna try to read through it again before we meet. But Iron Widow, for those who follow them on YouTube, Ziran J Zhao, Zhao, um, has they did the video of, like, everything that Mulan got wrong in like, the new Mulan got wrong about Chinese culture, and they ended up getting, like, millions of views on that video, and their YouTube channel took off overnight, and the video was really funny because they started it off like, "Have you ever been so mad about a movie that you started a YouTube channel just to, like, make a video bitching about it?" Um since then, they've continued to do kind of cultural breakdowns of other movies or TV shows and, just different Chinese cultural kind of commentary. And I just really love their channel. And so when they were talking about that they had written a book, I was like, okay, let me check this out. But it's one of those, I don't know why. I always think like, I'm always surprised when people are good at their craft, and I feel like an asshole that I always think that. Like, I had a friend who always talked about being an artist, and you're just kinda like, "Yeah," and then she painted something one day, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's really good," and she's like, "Yeah, I'm an artist, I told you that," and I'm like, "I know, but somehow I didn't think about you, like, being really good." Anyway, this ended up being like that, where I was like, okay, I really like this person, so I want to check out their book, but I didn't know what to expect, and it's just so good. It's like just unbelievably good. It was everything I've wanted. It's kind of a blend of sci-fi and fantasy. It's kind of hard to put it in like a set genre, but it is amazing, and it's got like queerness, polyamory, disability representation, female revenge. It's just so good. Definitely like leftist leaning politics. It's great. So I can't recommend it enough. And it was really a great experience for me because it's been a long time since I've read a book that I was really immersed in the way that I was immersed in this one and just kind of transported to this other world. And it's just such a good feeling to be so immersed in a story. So, let me Dimitri, yes, you can tag. I meant to do that in Discord. Thank you. I'm gonna catch up on comments real quick. Thanks for stopping by, Thomas. Hey, Alex, good to see you. Hey, Lucy, good to see you. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. So moving on. For nonfiction, we read Caliban and the Witch this year, finally. Hey, Dave. And by Sylvia Federici. And it is like so good. I'm not surprised why, I feel we ended up reading it because so many of the other books we had read in book club were referencing this book. And so we felt like, okay, we might as well just read it and see what the fuss is about. And it is great. It's kind of marketed as a breakdown of sort of it's marketed, I would say, around the witch hunts, but I think it's really just a great explanation of the buildup to capitalism and all the pieces that fit into that to make capitalism possible. So all of the things that happened in order to create the conditions under which people would accept capitalism. So she does get to the witch hunts by the end of the book, and that was really fascinating. But even more fascinating to me was kind of this entire exploration of building up to um, how people who had not, she even talked about how, say, laboring for a wage was so ridiculous to people when it was first introduced. And it was really like people equated that to slavery. And it's just fun, it's funny to think now, like that's such an accepted thing. But that people at the time really saw that for the trap that it was. So it's like, how do you create conditions where people who are that opposed to things like wage labor are going to accept it? And I just highly recommend it. It was great. I find myself referencing it and thinking about it all the time. Alex asked, how are your holidays, Nick? They've been good. Thank you for asking. I would love to hear how everyone else's holidays and end of year activities are going. I didn't really do much, which was good for me. I'm a little worn out, as most of you probably know. So my holiday was more on Friday, which was Christmas Eve for us. I took the day to just really like relax and have a good time and not think about anything too much. Yesterday I was prepping for this more and doing a few things around the house. So it was good. It's been good so far. It's like beer, but it's not. I wanted to recommend a couple romance books. Romance isn't my favorite genre, but it's one that like is obvious. It's like a popcorn genre. It's very easy to read, and as I was trying to get back into reading, I was like, oh, maybe some light romance would be a good way to kind of break the seal and ease into reading again. I read I read several books that I hated. But I did read a few that I thought were really, really good. And so I wanted to recommend these to everyone if you haven't read them. So, Such a Fun Age is one by Kylie Reed, I think. Um, and this one, I wasn't sure how to categorize it. I think it is technically categorized as a romance, and that's kind of the way that I approached it when I read it, but it's not really a romance novel. It's really more just about the main character, and her dating is part of it. But it's about a young Black woman who ends up becoming a nanny for a white family, and she ends up dating a white guy as well. And so it's about her navigating all of that and the complicated relationships that come up when you're, working for a wealthy white person, and you may become attached to the kids that you're taking care of, but at the same time, you're still a servant basically, and how, yeah, just complicated that can get. So, I am stumbling a little bit to describe it because I don't want to give anything away. There's so many like kind of, it's not really twists and turns, but you just fall into the story in such a way that I don't want to like spoil that journey for anyone. But I just thought it was really good, and it brought up a lot of topics in a way that wasn't so in your face, but we're also very clear. I think it's hard sometimes to weave political discourse into your fiction in a way that isn't heavy-handed or like too subtle. I don't mind subtlety, but just in terms of like trying to make a point, sometimes it can be too subtle if someone isn't already on your side. And I feel like this book did a really good job of kind of walking that line and finding that really good balance of like making a point and exploring stuff that, a white person, for instance, may not be aware of, or a middle class person might not be fully aware of. But yeah, also without being like super heavy handed with it. It's just really good. It's very well written. A Girl Like Her was so good. This is more just like traditional romance, and by Talia Hibbert, who is a really good writer. And this one I liked because the lead character is a Black woman who is autistic, and I felt like it was really, really good autistic representation. I related to her so much. Very mild spoiler, but at one point, she talked about how they took the stove out of her apartment because she kept like leaving things on the burner and stuff catching on fire. And I was like, I can relate to that. So anyway, it was really cute. Like she was very quirky and very like autistic, but it felt like in a way where it felt like, I don't think the author is autistic, but it felt to me like an autistic person could have written it, which is what I want from autistic representation. So it was just great. It was great. And then Can't Escape Love. This was by Alyssa Cole. And this one also features a Black female protagonist. The two main characters are a Black woman who's in a wheelchair, and then an Asian guy. I want to say I think he's Vietnamese. It's been a while since I've read it, but he is autistic, and they just have the most delightful, wonderful little romance. I love it so much. And it was written really well. Like there weren't any ridiculous there was no ridiculous conflict in the book. There were no silly ways that they were kept apart or silly misunderstandings or anything like that. I felt like it was written like I could actually believe these were two adults falling in love. And, the main conflict I think really is that the woman is independent and doesn't want to feel like she has to rely on anyone because of her disability. And so it's more her doing internal work to kind of like overcome that block and trust him, which I found really, really relatable. Um, and they're just so cute. Like from the second they meet, you're like, oh, you two are so cute. I want you to be together. So anyway, those are my three romance recommendations. I feel like a lot of us are wanting to escape nowadays and needing stuff that's kind of light and easy to consume. So I wanted to put those out there because the other two books I recommended are a bit more dense. All right, I'm going to check the comments. Paul said, I didn't have anything planned for Christmas except my parents coming to visit today, and that fell through. So I basically played video games instead. That's my favorite thing to do on the holidays is just play video games and watch, whatever. Sometimes I like watching Christmas-oriented stuff, and sometimes I don't. What did I watch today? Oh, I watched A Boy Called Christmas while I was getting ready. And it started off really good. It actually had some pretty, I thought, like kind of socialist or communist themes in it. And then it just sort of went off the rails at the end. I feel like it lost the thread. But it was cute. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Lucy Felly said I was allowed to cook a vegan Christmas dinner for my family, and there were no men at the family parties. That was nice. LMAO. That is nice. Hey, Pia, thanks for stopping in. Alex said holidays have been complex feeling. Father died last year this time, so it feels very weird. Plus, like 65% of my wealth was stolen. I was going to use that to buy a house. Oh, Alex, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I feel like the holidays are generally pretty loaded. Even if you enjoy them, I feel like there's still a lot. I just feel like they bring up a lot for people. And I know for me, I haven't really had a habit of celebrating the holidays in a long time. But even so, it's like the vibes are in the air, things are on TV and everyone's always talking about it. So it can be challenging for sure. All right, so moving on, I got my fave video games this year. And I played a lot of good games, so I just tried to pick the ones that I've also played a lot of bad games and return them. But I wanted to pick the ones that I thought had something really special about them and really stood out. And these are all independent, like indie games. I haven't played. I think the last big name game that I've played is like Final Fantasy VIII, which I'm working my way through right now. So I like to go on Steam and just get stuff that's on super sale and try it out. And then I try to make up for that by recommending it to other people who hopefully will buy it at full price. So I played Eichenfell. I'm actually not sure how to say it because there was no one said it in the game to hear how it's pronounced, but it's by Happy Ray Games, and it's kind of a blended genre. So it's RPG, turn-based tactics, and also like a puzzle game. A lot of the levels that you go into, the level itself, or the different like areas you go into are a puzzle that you have to kind of solve or like have puzzles within it, I should say, to be able to navigate through it. And then you fight enemies as you go through the levels, which is turn-based tactics. And then you have the RPG elements, like there's story elements, and then there's also everything is very light too. It's like a light tactics game, a light puzzle game, a light RPG. But it's really fun. And the biggest reason I recommend it is because it's so cute. So you can see the battle here. Every character you get has different spells that work in different ways and have different like areas of effect. And you have your little team. I think you end up with 6 characters total. And so you can play with 3 at any given time. And it's just really cute. And the characters are all have their own little personalities. This is the sort of main character who you kind of play as you go through the game. And her backstory is like she is a normie. She doesn't have magic, and her sister does have magic. So her sister has gone to this like witch school and has disappeared. She hasn't heard from her in a while. So she goes to try to find out what happened to her sister. And somehow along the way, she suddenly gets magical powers. And so she ends up hooking up with her sister's friends, and they're investigating and they're trying to figure out what happened. So she's funny because her and her sister have a complicated relationship. And you can see here, I pulled this one because I just thought it was really funny. She's like, I don't know what that means. I've been a witch for like 10 minutes. And so she's just kind of sassy and always saying stuff like that. But she's a good main character to kind of a good protagonist to kind of follow because she's learning about the world in a way that feels natural and not forced. And she also is just going through a lot of internal conflict that makes her interesting. And all the characters have their own kind of conflict. The storyline is really centered about sort of like working through trauma and like also interrogating your own behavior and the ways that that trauma might be manifesting and hurting other people and working through that to have really good relationships. And so I thought, what a great message. Love it. I also love it because it's super gay. This little uh, peanut here, Gilda, is my favorite character. She's so funny. She just wants to battle all the time and like use her big spells, and she's like always getting up in people's faces, but she like is immediately has a huge crush on the main character. And so you can see she's here, she was challenging her to a duel, but she kept getting distracted by how cute she thought she was. And then she's like, I'm so gay. And so there's a lot of that in the game. There's a lot of just like flat out saying like, oh, I'm super gay or whatever. So it was just like a nice little queer vibes too, which was really fun. And of course, anytime we're talking about magic and trauma and all of that stuff, I feel like that's just kind of inherently queer anyway. So it was nice that it was like explicitly queer as well. And it's just so cute. Look at how cute this little star is. It's so adorable. So it's just like a feel good game that has like kind of it has a real story to it, I think, but it's also kind of light in a way as well. It's a fairly quick game. I think you could get through it in like 20 to 25 hours, maybe even less. I'm someone who has to go poke around and do all the stuff, but I just found myself like I just really liked the characters and I really liked the graphics and the story. I did have issues with some of the levels. I felt were just a little bit too difficult or annoying. There's one level that has ice and then levers all over the place. So you have to like switch the levers to be able to navigate over the ice to get through different areas. And I just found it to be extremely irritating. Um, and then there was another level where you're walking around and all you can see is this little patch of light around you, and the rest of the level is dark and you can't see anything. And that is very hard for me I'm not very good at mapping stuff out in my brain. So that one was kind of irritating. But at the same time, I was able to get through both and like I was fine. So it's just me being a pill. But otherwise, like I just found it really fun. And if you're looking for something that presents like not really much of a challenge, but isn't overwhelmingly easy either, it'll challenge you a little bit, but not too hard. So it's a nice, like, casual game, is my point. Oh, Osway, welcome to the party. And Dave, I don't think I said hi to you. Uh, Allegory of the Dave said there's so much uncharted territory around cuteness and feels in games, and at the very least, nonviolence. You love to see it. Yes, I agree. Yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it. So, another game I wanted to recommend is Wintermoor Tactics Club by EVC Games. This one is also an RPG turn-based tactics and puzzle. This one's a little bit more centered on the tactics themselves, but it's still not, I saw people in the reviews saying that it was really easy. I would challenge that a little bit. I didn't find it to be like extremely easy. In terms of if you actually go through and try to do all the achievements, which one of them is to get like a perfect score in every single battle, that I found to be a bit challenging because the parameters around which each battle has its own parameters, that if you meet them, then you can get a perfect score. And I found that to be a little bit challenging, but it's still not up to the level of like, you know, uh, XCOM is what I was thinking of. Like someone was talking about that, like XCOM 2, which if like that's one of the hardest games ever made. So it's like, yeah, it's not at that level, but I still found it like nicely challenging. There were several battles I had to replay multiple times to win them. And definitely when I was going through to get all the achievements, getting perfect scores and some of them was really challenging even after I had all the upgrades and I had all the characters and everything. So I think it was fun. You can see here, I just really like the style of it. The kind of way that you play is so you're this character here. Her name in the real world is Alicia, and you play as her and you walk around this school and you like talk to people and you can do little side quests and stuff, which is really fun. And then the battle part is like when they meet for tactics club, you meet and you're basically playing, picture like D&D or something. You play this tabletop game and it appears to you like this. And then there's this storyline around the principal of the school because you're all at this school, and all these clubs have to fight each other in a snowball fight to see who is the best club. And there's a lot of story around that, which I won't spoil. That's kind of like the main plot line of the game. So it's just really fun because you go into the clubhouse and then you get to play these like tabletop simulations, and that's fun. And then you go and you have these snowball fights that are kind of in the real world, but they make them into a simulation like this as well. All the characters, similar to the last game, all the characters have their own unique moves. And so trying to figure out which three you should bring into battle ends up being, a big part of the strategy. Um, and they all have upgraded moves that you can get through battles. They all have different armor or items that you can equip that can greatly change the strategy that you use to win a battle. So I found it to be more complex and deep than a lot of the reviews had made it out to be. But still, like a game that you can pretty easily kind of kick back and play, which I really enjoy. Another aspect of this that I liked, it had really diverse characters, which is nice. And I liked this character, especially Jacob, was like this kind of anarchist sort of character, and he was just funny. He was always like here, he's trying to do graffiti and he has writer's block, so you help him pick like what word he's saying the school is. And he's just always talking about how everyone's a fascist and stuff. I just found it really funny. And he like is always getting into trouble doing something. But it's always like in protest of like school policy and stuff. So I thought that was cool. And Jania, I don't know if I'm saying her name right. She was probably my favorite character. She's part of one of the clubs is like psychic detectives. And they're these like weird kids who think they're psychic. And she's just always like making this little face where she's pointing and she's yelling something and she's always getting everyone all riled up to go do something. So I thought she was really cool. But yeah, I just thought like if you're a fan of that genre, it's just a really fun game, and I just really liked sort of the story, and I thought it was pretty creative in that there's different ways that you sort of interact with the real world versus the battle world. Like at one point, it's school spirit week, and you have to make like a poster for School Spirit Week, and you actually go into the art room and you like make a poster. And it was just really funny. So I made one that was like, "This school sucks," and blah blah blah. And then like you have to use it and it keeps showing it to you on the screen. And it's just mine looks so janky and hand drawn. It was just very funny. It just felt like this cool way that I was being integrated into the story. I also drew a horse for another side quest, and I made the horse look all evil and deranged, and like it looks terrible because I can't draw on the best of days, and especially not just with a mouse. Um, and that horse keeps getting that horse picture keeps getting pulled up in later conversations, and just every time I get pulled up, it would make me laugh because it just was so it's just so bad looking. I don't know. It was just really fun. Oh, Dave, the one I just mentioned was, can I go back? Can I go back? It's not letting me go back. There we go. Wintermore Tactics Club. And then the last game that I wanted to talk about was Paradise Killer, Kaizen Gameworks. And this one's it's categorized as an investigation. I'll get to that in a minute. I don't think it's not a true investigation game. It is definitely open world and exploration. I would say, if anything, it's actually more of like a collection game than actually a true investigation game. But so I had kind of conflicted feelings about it, but it's such a creative, just gorgeous, beautiful game that I had to recommend it, even though so one of the issues I have with it is a big part of the game is just going around and talking to people, and you just keep talking to them and you get different prompts and you can hang out with them, and through that you will eventually acquire different pieces of evidence through your conversations. And you also acquire evidence by just physically going around to different locations and kind of looking at stuff, following clues, collecting items. Um, so that's why I say it's more of a collection game, because you're not really doing any deduction. You're just literally going around collecting stuff until you have enough evidence to accuse people. And my autistic ass was like, I could not figure out the prompts. The conversation prompts were so confusing to me. In terms of, so a lot of games where you would do something like this, you might have traits that help you navigate a conversation better. So you might be stronger in persuasion or charm or interrogation or something like that, where you might have, or intimidation, you might have prompts where you have more skills, so you can kind of use those to navigate the conversation more easily. For me, so they don't have anything like that. All of the conversations just happen in the same way. Sometimes you might have a piece of evidence that can help give you a new prompt in a conversation and can give you a leg up in that conversation. But I couldn't really seem to figure out, like, everyone had their own personality, but I couldn't really seem to figure out like how I was supposed to be navigating these conversations. There's no Some games might have like a point system or something to help you understand like when you've done the optimal path, the conversation path, and when you have done something that's bad. And then that way you can kind of learn as you go through like how to talk to people. But this didn't have that. So for instance, like every time you hang out with people, your relationship increases. And when you hit certain levels with people, they'll give you like a really critical piece of information or a piece of evidence. But every time you hang out with them, your level increases. I was not able to find out, like, okay, well, is there a conversation path where my level increases more? You know what I mean? Or not, because the end result just looks the same each time. So I found that kind of stressful, because such a big part of the game is talking to people. And I just found myself constantly being like, I also have decision paralysis in general. So not having like a clear understanding of what I was supposed to be doing, like what how I was supposed to be interacting with people, was just frustrating. And I ended up having sex with 2 people without even like meaning to, just because they were being kind of flirty. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'm supposed to flirt back. And then we ended up like banging. And I was like, well, I mean, it was fine, but I was like, oh, I didn't even like intend that to happen. So anyway, it was just kind of a bit stressful. It was like fine, but it just didn't feel good to feel like I didn't have a good handle on the conversation mechanics. Um, and then yeah, just the world that they created is so just different and particular, which is something I think is a bonus about the game because the world is really creative and they did so much work to like build out the lore and how the world works and like give you that information as you're investigating. But the problem with that is that it's hard to investigate if you don't understand the logic of the world that you're in. Like, how do you know when someone's acting weird when people around you? I mean, look at like you're talking to a skeleton guy, or you're talking to a demon, or you're talking to these people who are basically gods on this island. So it's really hard to like that aspect of it as well was difficult because you didn't really feel like you're investigating as much as you felt like you were just trying to understand the lore and the mechanics of the world around you, versus like having any rooting in reality to be like, okay, I know, like this doesn't add up from what I know about how things work. So this person's suspicious to me. I was like, I don't know, anyone could have done it. I will say the final mechanic of um the trial I found really cool. All of your evidence that you collected is accessible in a menu. And so when they bring up a crime, you accuse a certain person and then you're have all this evidence that you can present and the evidence might branch out and even like implicate someone else and that person will get brought into the conversation. I don't know, there was just something extremely satisfying about it and I had been thinking originally that like I probably would never replay this game, but now, knowing that, like, there was more evidence that I could have gotten for the ending part, I actually might at some point. So I think the ending trial, system was really cool, and I would love to see it implemented in a different game that is just more consistent about what it is, whether it's an investigation game or a collection game, but this one was kind of both in a way that didn't detract enough for me to not recommend it, but I just if this developer does another game, I just hope they can kind of, like, get more clear on what the game really is and do that, like, really commit to that, and I think they'll have, like, an amazing game on their hands, but even so, I still thought it was really cool, um, and just very unique and enjoyable. Oh, Lucy said, ContraPoint streamed the game Ambition, Minuet in Power this year, and I loved it. Set during the French Revolution, and you can be gay as well. Love that. Paul said, I started on Paradise Killer, but basically bounced off before I even got to the gameplay. And Dave said it recently added it to my wish list on based on aesthetic alone. Yeah, the aesthetic and the music too is just so good. And it just gives you like everything you would want from the, screenshots that you see. So it really fulfills on that. And honestly, the collection aspect was enjoyable. Um, it was just hard because I did have my heart set on like doing some investigation stuff, but it was really fun to run around that world. And something that I didn't know going in is that you acquire different powers as you run around. So initially, there's some stuff that you're like I'm not really sure like how I'll get up there, how I would get to something, and then you end up getting a power that facilitates that. So mild spoiler, I guess. It's not really, but it was really neat to go along and be like, oh, this is cool. Like I don't know. I don't want to spoil anything, but it was just really neat to go along and like have more stuff facilitate because certain things I was like, how would you even do this? And then I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. TV shows. I've been watching a lot of TV, uh, as we all know. And so Josh Thomas, who wrote and starred in Please Like Me, which I think is slightly more popular than this show, um, created this show, Everything's Gonna Be Okay. And I watched this after his other show, Please Like Me, and I actually like this show a lot better. Um, it has really amazing autistic representation. This actress here is played by someone who is autistic in real life. And it's funny too because I think I actually felt like the other sister also came off as very autistic. And then Josh Thomas discovered that he's autistic after season one, or maybe while they were filming season one. So I think it's one of those interesting situations, which also happens with queerness a lot, where someone doesn't know something about themselves, but it's coming through in their work. And if you're part of that community, you like pick up on it and you're just so excited. So it was really cool to watch the show and then learn that he realized that he is autistic, like in real life, and just how much of that was coming through in his work without him realizing that's what it was. Because his character in both shows often struggles with understanding like why other people get mad at him or why what he's doing is not okay. He's seen as like rude or just kind of, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. Um Maybe careless, with other people, but he's always so confused by it. And then yeah, for him to realize that cuz his characters are, at least semi-autobiographical. So for him to realize that he's autistic and this is why it's such a struggle with other people, I was just like, yeah, I can relate to that. I love that. And it's also just like a really wholesome show. It only has 2 seasons, which I'm sad about. I wish it had at least one more. But at the same time, it's kind of nice because I know a lot of us are inundated with media to watch. And so to know that, this one is just kind of a smaller series and then you're done, I think can be nice sometimes. And they did manage to end the second season in a way that's pretty satisfying, even though they didn't know at the time that they weren't going to get a third season. Paul, apparently that scene where he dunks food on his boyfriend in the tub and then doesn't eat why his boyfriend is mad is based on something he did in real life. That is wild. That was so funny because that scene, I was like, I was mad. I was on the boyfriend side. Like, why would you do that? But I have such a thing about food. Like, I don't like food being anywhere except on a plate or in a bowl. I don't like it being like, I hate when there's food fight scenes and stuff. Um, but exactly, like, you could just tell, like, there's times that his boyfriend would get mad and he would just be like, I literally don't understand what's going on right now. And initially you think he's just being a dick, but then you kind of like see that he really means it. Like he really doesn't understand why someone's mad at him. And I think true to like typical autistic form as well, it's not that he just comes off as a jerk. The premise of the show, which you find out like immediately in the beginning, is that his dad's dying and these two girls are his half sisters, and his dad is preparing for his death and wants the girls to pick who's going to take care of them. And I can't remember his name on the show. So Josh Thomas's character, whose name on the show I'm blanking. Oh, I think it's Nicholas. I should remember that. So Nicholas actually volunteers to become their guardian after his dad dies, even though he has very little relationship with them, and he kind of resents them in a way because his dad basically like stopped really being a father to him and really invested way more love and care into these two girls than he ever had with him. Um, so it's I just really appreciated that because I'm someone who also will like stand up to take care of stuff and just be really reliable, but may also kind of disappoint people with like not maybe like not expressing my affection as much as they want me to like say it, but to me it's like, but I'm doing all these like really big deal things for you, and it doesn't occur to me to vocalize that because I feel like it's so obvious. Um and I sense that from him too. Like he was really stepping in to take care of people and to be reliable. But then yeah, he'll also do stuff like dump food on his boyfriend in the tub and then just be genuinely confused as to why he's mad. So to me, it was cool because it felt like representation that I could truly, like, really relate to of just this weird, almost contradictory nature that a lot of us have, where it's like we can be so loyal and so thoughtful and so dependable, and then also just be kind of like not understanding how other people work in a big way as well. I loved it. I was like very sad when it was over. Um And it's a comedy, but it is handling a lot of kinda heavy content at the same time, so it's not really a dark comedy, it's just sort of a comedy with some, like, heavy themes in it, but I just found it to be really wholesome and really sweet, while also being very, like, sassy and rude. I think I liked it better than Please Like Me because Please Like Me seemed to be just a bunch of bad people or people who are just unlikable. Um, Whereas this seemed to be people who were complicated, and like just like real people to me. No one on this show was an asshole. It's just a lot of them had different needs and different ways of expressing themselves. And a big point of the show is them all kind of like figuring that out together. Um, there's even a scene where the sister goes and the other sister goes and does stand up, and a lot of it's about her autistic sister. And I had like complicated feelings about it because she's, exploring like how difficult it was to grow up with a sister who had such intense needs and took so much attention away from her. But like, I don't know, it was just done with really amazing nuance, I think, of like, that would be hard, that is hard, but, like, she still loves her too at the same time, so I thought it was really good. I found this series called Sort of. I think if I remember, there's only 1 season so far, on HBO Max, and I really enjoyed it. It's about a non-binary Pakistani person who ends up becoming a caretaker for a white family, and running theme for some reason this year. Um, and is just really struggling in a lot of different ways. They're not out to their at the very beginning of the show when we meet them, they're not out to their parents yet as non-binary or their family. They're also not out to their parents as like being a caretaker. I think I forget what they were going to school for, but they're, smart and they're educated, but they're just kind of lost. And so they sort of just took this job, and they know that their parents will see it, them performing a service role for a white family would be very upsetting for their parents. So when we meet them, they're just in a lot of different ways, really struggling to kind of like figure things out and to sort of like own up to who they are to the people around them. And there's some exploration towards the end of this season with them meeting a trans woman and having a conversation about how they're kind of like haven't really come to terms with their transness yet. I just really liked it. It's another one that's sort of billed as a comedy. It's sort of funny, but it's just good. It's just very much like, relatable, I think, for a lot of people who have kind of a windy, twisty path towards like, who am I? What am I? And how the hell do I explain it to the people around me in my life that I know won't understand, but that I like care about and that I want to have a relationship with? Um, so it handles a lot of that stuff could be heavy. It never feels overly heavy, but it does feel like very, very relatable, I think. And I really liked it. And then I have 2 reboot recommendations. If you didn't watch the first ones or have like investment in the originals, I think you could still really enjoy these. I think so. Saved by the Bell is back, baby. And it's really, really, really good. And I think like I do think definitely part of my enjoyment of it is I grew up with the original Saved by the Bell, and so the kind of humor that they tend to have on this show, I think hits me a bit harder maybe than it would someone else who hadn't grown up with it. But I do think it's very accessible to a new audience. So I don't think if you didn't watch the original, that you couldn't enjoy this. They've really mixed it up. So they've made the cast much more diverse. The main character that we follow, Lucy, is Mexican. Sorry, what is her name? Sorry, I said Lucy. Lucy was Lucy's her best friend, but I think that was her name in Moxie. I'm mixing up my characters. So this actress was in that movie Moxie, and I think her name was Lucy. And then because I remember everyone was like, Lucy should be the main character. Anyway, these 2 girls basically, like she is the main character. Um, so she takes over for the Zach Morris role of like she actually talks directly to the camera, and we're like following her around, but you do also get really into other people's stories as well. So there's a trans girl, and there's these kids, and the storyline is that they got brought over their school, which has like much less funding, is in a poorer area, got closed down because of the cuts that Zach Morris, who's now like the governor or something, made. So now they have to go to Bayside and be with the rich kids. And so they're largely kids of color. They're from much lower income families. And so there's like this instant tension that they explore through the show of these like class differences and also like racial tensions and stuff. And it's just really well done. And it's really cute and light and fun, as much as it is also giving time and space to pretty serious topics. Um, and there's a lot of exploration of the systemic issues. So this change that Zach Morris makes that ends up shutting down their school and getting them there is kind of followed through. And it's been made pretty clear that like there's no quick fix that's going to get them back. Like at one point someone tries to get their school up and running again to get them out. Some racist parent wants them all out of Bayside. But it shows that like you can't like there's no way for them to just like get their school back up and running and then they're going to be fine. Like it shows that they would be neglected again, that they would lose their funding again, and that everything they had done was just surface level changes. It wasn't actually providing them with the resources that they need to get a proper education. So I feel like they focus on that stuff really well. and then still manage to have it be like very goofy and silly and just wonderful. I just find it like it just makes me so happy to watch it. So I highly recommend it. Especially if you watch the original. I don't think like I would still love the original today. I haven't rewatched it as an adult, but it was a huge part of my growing up. And so I'm really happy to have this to watch now. Um, that's just like even they even try to address some of the issues with the original series in this show and kind of call out some of that stuff. And it helps that like AC Slater and Jesse Spano are back. And then Zach and what's her face? Tiffany Amber Thiessen, Kelly. Zach and Kelly are in the story as well. So they actually have enough of the original cast to do that sometimes of like having the original people who did some of the problematic behavior be like, oh, that was really fucked up and I shouldn't have done that. So, which I think is really just really cool. And then the Babysitters Club. So I have Mexi to thank for this one. She loves this show so much, and she did an episode about it, which no, a video about it, maybe both actually, um, with I think Jose, if I'm remembering correctly. And after watching that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch this. So I was not really into the Babysitters Club books or anything when I was younger. It just didn't really pique my interest. But the show, so I can say, like, even if you weren't someone who was into this when you were younger, it doesn't matter. The show is so good. But the show is really cool. They run the Babysitters Club as a workers' co op, and they make like a big point of that in the show. It's not just like a fact that I know, it's something that they spend a lot of their meetings talking about how, how the job assignment works, how the like where the dues go and what people pay in and how to make that fair. At one point, one of the babysitters gets, I can't remember if she gets sick or if just something happens, but she's unable to work for whatever amount of time. And they're like, okay, like you're gonna not work and you're still gonna get paid. They like have a they have a protest at a camp that they go to because the camp is charging for all of the good like artistic activities and stuff, so there are kids at the camp who can't afford to do the activities. Um, so they stage a protest and kind of handle that. So it's just extremely leftist and like in a way that's super cool and just very focused on like working class solidarity and alternatives to like profit sharing and stuff, which I think is just really neat to see in a kid's show. And the girls are really just cute. They're well cast. The actresses are really good. And again, they do a pretty, it could be like slightly more diverse in certain ways, but they do a really good job of having it be not just racially diverse, but also like class diverse. There's like class and disabilities. So you have this girl here is like from a pretty well-to-do family, but she's diabetic, and it like talks, it shows a lot of her trying to manage her diabetes and how it like affects her life. And then some of the girls are more, from working class families. So it's just really cool and showing like solidarity, not just amongst like one class, but like across, racial and class lines. And I'm just like, fuck yeah, comrades, like get those babies radicalized. So I think it's good. And it's another one that's just like, they deal with some serious topics, but ultimately it's just a very feel good show, and you can like just watch it and like breathe and have fun, which I think is really important, especially in the times that we're living in. All right, so I have to apologize ahead of time. I have been on an insatiable horror kick for several months now. So all of the movies I have are in the horror genre, which I know doesn't work for a lot of people, but here we are. I looked through my list and I was like, wow, every movie I've loved this year has been a horror movie. That's interesting. Um, but, we have different levels of horror. So the first one I want to recommend is the Fear Street trilogy that's on Netflix. These were all released, I think, within a week or something, or 3 weeks. Um, and these are based on R.L. Stein books that I had never read. So I don't know how they match up to that. But the reason I'm recommending them, the first one, so Little Cutie Thought Slime, thank God, did a review of these movies, and they said that they had almost stopped watching the first one like a half hour in or something. And it was really funny because I watched their review and then I went back to Netflix and I looked and I had stopped watching the first one about a half hour in. So thank thank God they made their review because I never would have gone back and finished it. So the first one does have an issue with the first half hour is like pretty boring and it's just extremely like cliche and basic. I think that's why I turned it off because I was like, I feel like I've seen this a million times and I don't like it and I don't need to see this. But if you hang through, it gets so much better. And then the trilogy as a whole, the third movie in the trilogy is the best one, the 1666 is just phenomenal. But all three movies are really good and they tell the story going back in time. And it's a story basically about like being gay, but it's also a story about like the upper class. It's one of those representations of the upper class, almost like cannibalizing the lower classes, and there's also, like, a racial analysis in there as well, and, I don't wanna go too far into it because I want you to experience the unfolding of all these stories, but it's, like, way deeper than I would have thought, watching the first 30 minutes of the first one. It actually does stuff in a really unique way. I think it tells a really cool story, has a really good analysis throughout, and like I said, if you can get to the third one, they're all good. Like it's not saying the other two aren't good, but the third one I thought was just outstanding. So I do highly recommend it. It is a little gory. It's not like the most violent thing you're ever gonna watch, but if you can't do, like, blood or deaths at all, then definitely skip this one. Um, but I will say, like, I don't think this is one that would scare most people. It's not really, like, a scary trilogy. It's kind of more almost like a campy slasher, but with, like, a really good story. So if you can handle that kind of horror, then these are right up your alley. So Bit, I heard about from Sophie, whose channel used to be called Curio, and I think is now called Sophie from Mars. And I'm so glad I did. I forget what video she was even talking about, like what video this was in, but she mentioned Bit as a really good movie. It's actually written and directed by a cishet man, which I find shocking because it's a story about a trans girl who goes to LA to visit her brother and kind of get away. I think she's from like maybe the Midwest or something. So, it's like a chance for her to go be in a bigger, more progressive city for the first time. And in that, she goes out to a club with her brother and ends up meeting this lesbian vampire who has a lesbian vampire gang, where their number one rule is no boys. So you can eat boys, but you can't turn them into vampires. And I just thought this was such a great movie. it explores not deeply, I kind of wish it had done more with this, but it sort of explores the idea of, like, what if, we took something like vampirism and explored the idea of, like, what if only, marginalized, vulnerable people had this power and we didn't allow those in power to have it, like, what if we did that? Which I think is a really cool kind of concept to explore. I didn't love the ending of it, which I won't spoil, but I feel like because there's something also to be said about like solidarity, and I think it lost its way a little bit with the head vampire chick, um, in regards to her. I think it can be interesting to have someone be a flawed leader, but I think when you're telling a story like this, then you can get yourself into dangerous territory of like, well, what are you trying to say? And so I think the end of the film lost its way a little bit with some of the themes. But overall, I still think it was a really fucking cool film. This is another one that I don't even know if it actually qualifies as horror because I don't like there really isn't much blood or violence in it. Um but I also check content warnings because I don't want to lead someone astray. But I don't really remember much of it. Like even some of the violence that happens, I feel like happens off camera. So I think this one more has kind of like a spooky theme in that they're vampires, but I don't think you really see much like blood and gore on the screen. So this might be a good one too, more accessible for people who can't take, too much violence in a movie. And then I'm like probably the last person to discover this, but Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. This is, I think it came out in the late 80s. And it was a movie that I just, for some reason, this cover did not appeal to me. So I never ended up watching it. And you guys, this is like the best fucking movie ever made. It's so good. I have been completely missing out this whole time. But this movie is about generally, uh, how do you even sum it up? It's about gentrification, it's about class inequality, it's about racism. Um, there's like a commentary sort of on the Reagans and like Reaganomics, and just policies under that presidency. You have these two white landlords who call each other mother and daddy, I think. Mother, I don't know if it's mother and father, mommy. Anyway, creepy white people shit. Um and they're attempting to gentrify the neighborhood. And then you have the main character who's a kid whose neighborhood is being gentrified. His mother's sick. They're financially destitute, and so he gets roped into this scheme to break into these people's house and steal some stuff to sell. And of course, he ends up getting caught in the house, and then we go from there. But it's kind of hard to even encapsulate like how genius this movie was, how many little details there were around that if you're a leftist, I think you pick up on and are just like, whoa. Um, like one scene just had a TV playing in the background of us dropping bombs in the Middle East, and it was like not even commented on, but it was just so clearly tied into everything else that was happening. There's so many little things like that. As they go through the house, you're like, this is just such a commentary on just so much and just how like racist white people, how greedy they are and how violent they are and how much they get away with. There's another scene where they're like have been shooting guns in the house and the cops get called on like, because people are like, oh, something's happening over here. And the cops come and they just like get away, like, the cops don't even investigate because it's 2 white people, they just, like, get away with it, you know? There's just so many things that happen in it that are just really great, and it's campy, but it is also pretty scary, like, I don't know, it's very effective. So it's this wonderful blend of like humor and political commentary and also like a genuinely kind of creepy movie. And it just does so much and I love it. So if you're like me and somehow you haven't seen it yet, it holds up. I just saw it for the first time this year and just thoroughly enjoyed it and was like entranced the whole time. So I highly recommend it. Hey, Max. Oh, thank you, babe. You're one of my favorite things too. And then I wanted to end this all with a surprise twist ending. I actually found a Nicolas Cage movie that I really liked, believe it or not. And that's Mandy. And this movie is hard to recommend because it's so, oh, it's like a being on drugs. It's one of those movies where it's, like, very psychedelic and very, it's not exactly abstract. It definitely has a plot, but it's a very loose, generic plot, and then there's just a lot of visuals that happen around that. But this was the one movie I've seen in I don't even know how long, where I feel like Nicolas Cage was perfectly cast. I think he did an incredible job because his weirdo form of acting fit in perfectly with the style of the film. It is extremely violent, and that's kind of the point. It's one of those movies where the violence almost becomes funny because it's so over the top. Um, and it's just like a very simple plot of like these two people are in love, and then a bad person comes in and does bad stuff, and then it turns into a revenge film. And I have hit or miss feelings about movies like that because I don't like when bad things happen just for the sake of like having bad things happen. But somehow this film this film's just an experience. Um that and it just was so unique. The music is incredible. The visuals are incredible. The color palette is amazing. I feel like Nicolas Cage was incredible in it. He has this scene where, he's watching something really bad happen and just his reaction is like heart-wrenching and just also so like animalistic and visceral in a way that only he can do. And it's just was great. So anyway, definitely very violent. Can't recommend it if that will bother you. But if you're in for like a trippy revenge story of like Nicolas Cage just being the most himself and it being perfect and listening to some like amazing music, I can't recommend it enough. I don't know if you should or should not do drugs when you watch this. He Nicolas Cage does drugs in the movie, and the way it's filmed is like you feel like you're on drugs. So I don't know if being on drugs would make that even more enjoyable or if it would make it too trippy, but definitely an experience I'm really, really glad that I had. Oh, so that's all I've got. Those are all my favorite things from 20, not all of my favorite things, but those are the ones I wanted to highlight. Especially if you're like me and you're looking for a distraction from the world that's exploding around us. I actually watched Don't Look Up last night. I don't know if any of you have seen it yet. It just came out on Netflix, but it's about a comet that's going to hit the earth in like, I think the scientists discover it when we have like 5 months left. And it's just about how basically like nobody cares and nobody takes it seriously. And then the only time that people act on it is if it's politically or financially advantageous. And it's good I'm still trying to figure out if it was a good thing for me to watch or a bad thing for me to watch because I've had some really, really intense existential dread the last few days. I don't know why, for some reason, this week it just really hit me very hard of the reality of like the life that we're all living right now. And so this movie in a way was cathartic because obviously you could easily replace the comment with COVID, or any other crisis that we're having right now. And it's a apt analogy. So it's kind of cathartic to be like, okay, well, obviously other people are having the same fear and frustration as me. And, this is what could happen. But it also I think for that exact reason too, it also like hit a little too close to home, and I've just felt kind of weird since it ended last night. So yes, I wanted to provide some things that could be a nice escape from all of that, but I do want to also like acknowledge that if maybe you're fine, but I'm not fine right now. I'm having a really hard time. Um, and I think that's normal. I think it's healthy. I'm not sure how to process how I feel. I don't know like what to do, with all my feelings, but I'm trying to acknowledge them. I'm trying to take them seriously and validate them because it is valid to be scared right now. I want to go get a booster, and there's so many people who haven't even been vaccinated yet, and I have so many complicated feelings about that. And it's also hard to, I think, internalize the fact that like we're going to have to keep getting boosters, and this is something we're going to have to live with for a long time, if not forever. And you look around and there's so many people just not taking it seriously, and will never it's one of those things where it can't be just an individual choice. We need collective action, and we're living in a world that has suppressed collective action for decades and decades, if not hundreds of years now. And that's hard. That's hard to grapple with. Like, I don't know. It's not like just having personal trauma where I can be like, okay, I've got to work through this. It's like, no, this is a really valid thing and it's happening, and I have limited control over that. And I don't know. And like other people's actions are directly affecting me. And I don't really know what to do with all of that. But all I can do, I guess all of any of us can do is just, be as accountable as we can individually and try to keep putting one foot in front of another. I don't want to lay down and die because things are, and I mean that metaphorically, um, because things are scary and because I don't know what's going to happen. I still want to have dreams for the future. I still want to try to enjoy my life and enjoy the people around me, but I also don't want to like gaslight myself, I guess is my point. And I do feel like very gaslit by the environment around me. I don't know how you all feel. I would love to hear from people in other countries how you feel just in general, like around the people who are physically around you. But here, it just feels like everyone all year has been like, oh, yay, we're back to normal now. And I'm just like, I don't, it's like, what? We're not back to normal though, like at all. Um, so anyway, America's a death cult is what I'm trying to say. And I, as someone who's been deprogrammed, I'm not really sure how to navigate day-to-day life in this situation. And I think it just, I've been really struggling to figure out like why I'm having such a hard time. And I don't think that that's all of it, but I think I needed to stop and give myself like some permission to understand that this has been really hard and weird because I feel like we all talked about how hard and weird 2020 was, and then this year it's kind of been like this weird limbo year where we're not really talking about how things are still really bad, because they're not bad in the same way that they were bad last year. I mean, they are. They are. Um, but, it's not in this way, like, we're not having the protests, we're not having these kind of, like, external, I think, manifestations of people's frustration and fear and rage, and so it's felt like kind of a weird year to feel weird, it feels like a year where everyone is sort of holding their breath and just trying to convince themselves that, like, the bad times are over and that we can move on. I think, again, especially in the US with Biden coming into the presidency and a lot of the libs just being like, great, like now we don't have to be upset or think about anything anymore. And it's like, no, we definitely do. Like we always have, but especially now we definitely do. Um, so yeah, I think, I don't know if that puts I don't know if that's cathartic for anyone or if it puts anything into perspective for you, but I think it's just hit me this week, within the last few days that I think that is a big thing that's been weighing on me, but it's been something that I didn't believe it could be affecting me that much. Especially since I feel so isolated. I really do just stay in my house. I don't see anyone. Um, So it was hard for me to understand that, like, I might actually be feeling a lot of dread and a lot of fear still, even though I'm so isolated. And even though for me right now, it's extremely unlikely that I could catch COVID, but it's still there and it's still impacting my behavior in a big way. And I think, like, I hadn't really acknowledged that. So 2022, I'm trying to acknowledge the fact that I'm living, I think it's the pain of living in a country that's not taking care of you, living in a world that is not taking care of you and not taking care of the situation. Um, and that's going to have an impact. It's going to have an impact. I think for people like me, and I think a lot of you are like this, we're very sensitive, we're very knowledgeable. And so it can be easy to be just really overwhelmed by I can stop sharing my screen now. It can be easy to get really overwhelmed by like systemic oppression and feeling that you're small and you don't have much power to do anything. Um, and when something like a pandemic happens and your government doesn't take care of you, and countries in this world are being completely allowed to just fall off the map, um not really fall off the map, but like are not being given any support. It just makes it all just very acute, I guess. And yeah, I've been having a hard time. So I've been leaning on video games and media to help me navigate that and to help me just try to access a bit of joy every day. I'm not exactly numbing, although I think that's okay, you know, in certain amounts. I think we need to do that sometimes, maybe people like me at least, where I just do get so overwhelmed. Um, But for me, for some reason, media always makes me feel, like, really grateful to be alive. Like, when I hear a really good new song or I watch a really good movie, I just think, like, I'm so happy to be here to have experienced this. So I think that's part of, like, I'm trying to stay connected to things that make me feel happy to still be here, even though I, you know, am existing in a time that's really scary and feeling very displaced. I think I feel very detached from everything and just kind of like in this bizarre stasis that I think maybe that's what's hit me is that this stasis may not really change much anytime soon. Um, and I feel like I'm late. You know, I think like other people have been really struggling with that for a long time, but for some reason, I don't know, maybe just because I'm like okay being alone for the most part. Maybe it just took longer to hit me, but I'm like, fuck. This is like we're in it, you know, and people aren't doing anything to like the people who have the power aren't doing anything to make it better or prevent it. So anyway, for next year, to bring it back around to something uplifting, for next year, I'm very excited that I will be launching my new podcast, my Star Trek podcast with my buddy Mike. We're actually having the music for that podcast made right now. And, you know, because I always want an intro song that's a banger. So we're having someone mix us a custom song. I'm really excited about that. We have like 5 episodes recorded, so we'll be able to launch with a few episodes and get those scheduled out. So I'm really excited for that. I do think I might go back to live streaming once a month next year, at least for a while. Even though it doesn't help grow my channel, it is something I enjoy doing. And it seems like we get a pretty good, like we get like the same good crowd of people who come to the live streams. And I feel like that's fun. And I feel like I have topics that I want to discuss uh, that I think you all would like hearing about. And, you know, if I have the spoons to do it, then it's fine. I've never wanted my actions to be just dictated by what will help me grow. It's really more that like I need to start making more money. So I do need to like prioritize those actions over others. But for whoever watched the excuse me, the a little to the left stream that we just did with the talking about is queerness a white thing. I think within that conversation there were so many cool topics that came up. So I would probably want to have some of those panelists back on my channel here to talk about, like, I was thinking it'd be really fun to talk about like what is queerness and really do a deep dive on defining that. Because I feel like the panelists had some really neat ideas, and I was trying to stay quiet because it was a BIPOC panel. So I'm like, you know, let me keep my voice out of it. But I was like, I had so many things that I wanted to say or threads that they brought up that I wanted to follow up on because it was just such a fascinating conversation. So I'm excited thinking about maybe doing some of that work. I want to do a stream about privilege using a Sonia Renee Taylor video as like a talking point. I think that will be really cool. And just kind of whatever else pops into my head. I think it'd be fun to just keep this going over here. You know, just as I have stuff that I really want to talk about. So that will be fun. And the podcast will keep trekking along. So thank you to anyone who listens to the podcast. It's been really fun. I do need more questions. So if you have any questions or talking prompts, that would be good. But it's been a really fulfilling project over there to connect with people emotionally over the stuff that they want to hear me talk about. It's wild to me that people want to hear me talk about things. And it's just been really cool. It's been great in Discord that after I do an episode, you know, people will come in the Discord server and talk about it. And it's been really cool to engage with people and get feedback in that way. That's not like through a review or through social media. It's more sort of direct and private, I guess. It's, you know, it's not like this public statement. It's like we're actually just having a conversation about stuff. And it's really cool to talk to people after I answer a question of theirs and get their, you know, feedback and see if it was helpful. So that work has been really cool, and I'm excited to just keep doing that as I have been. So anyway, My voice is starting to go on me. I would love to hear from any of you if you have any big like resolutions for next year, goals for next year. I would love to hear how you all are doing in general. I see Alex, was like hoping for the Rev within a decade. I hope so too. And I I think that's part of, what I'm trying to cultivate with all of these complicated feelings is that and I think this is part of what I'm processing from watching that movie last night. Now, granted, this movie, I'm sure, was made by liberals. So, it's like grain of salt. Um, and of course, there are a ton of like rich, famous people in it. So it's like, well, but it did honestly speak to me in a big way of just the like Lovecraftian horror almost of literally watching something come down, and the whole, "Don't Look Up" is this, like, conservative movement of people trying to prevent people from literally just looking up to see the comet that's gonna hit them so that they can keep believing that the comet is, like, this liberal conspiracy, and it was just such a good, I think, analogy for how this feels right now. It feels like that. Like we can look around and we can see people are sick. We can see people dying. We can, like when it's at its height, you can physically see like body bags stacked up in places. And yet people are still claiming that this is all a conspiracy. And it's like, what do we do with that? So my point is that I'm hoping I feel this way, but it seems like other people really feel this way too, even people who maybe don't have the same analysis that we have. Hopefully that ends up translating into something. And I do have to hope that within my lifetime, I'm going to see some kind of revolution, some kind of shift. I don't know what it'll end up looking like, and I don't know what it'll be during my lifetime, but I'm just having to hope that all of these hard, haunting feelings that I have are shared by other people, and that we will find a way forward, that we will find a way to make some kind of progress. And also, shit's just breaking. Shit's just gotten too far. And there's so many external factors now, and it's just going to get worse. So I have to hope. I have to hope that, like, we'll get through to something better. Or we'll die. Not to get dark, but you know, I guess there's always that. So anyway, I'm gonna try to like continue to, I'm just trying to like take better care of myself, really good care of myself. I'm trying to set better boundaries. um Around, I talked about one of the reasons I think too that I'm struggling is I've just been doing a lot of online social stuff lately, and I find that really taxing. So I'm trying to, set better boundaries really for myself around it. Because it's not even like I need to say no to people. It's like I need to stop seeking out things to do and join if it's too much. So I really want to do that. I want to try to pay attention to myself and give myself the space that I might need. Because my big problem is I always think like I shouldn't need this space. Like I think like I never see anyone, so who cares if I'm doing stuff online like 3 or 4 times a week? But it's like realistically though, that's too much for me. And I think for most people, I think streaming, being online, doing stuff 3 to 4 times a week, and doing it for hours and hours at a time would probably be a lot for most people, especially most like disabled autistic people. So I need to stop thinking that for some reason I'm supposed to be able to do stuff that I simply cannot do without consequences. Um, and I know you all have heard me talk about this a million times, so all I can say is it's a journey. The journey away from being a overachieving perfectionist is a long and complicated one. Even when you're an unemployed hero, you still find your ways to work productivity into your life. Um, Even if it's in these indirect ways that you wouldn't think about, like hosting a book club and then joining a book club and then playing games with your friends and then being on all these live streams. And, it's just this way, you just always find another way instead of being like, what if I just did nothing? What if I just didn't do these things? So, my big goal for the new year is like to get outside more. And that might sound silly, maybe not in these times, but I just want to like be away from screens, be in the sun. Especially I live in Southern California, I have no excuse. Like, it's actually the perfect time of year right now to go outside because it's not so crushingly hot all the time. So, yeah, I wanna just, like, try to try to counteract this, Mohira was telling me there's an actual, I don't know if condition is the right word, but there's an actual thing called, like, pandemic brain now, where people have a hard time paying attention and have brain fog and, just having a lot of issues. And I am like, I definitely relate to that. So I was thinking about it and I'm like, well, how could you counteract pandemic brain? And I think for me, definitely like logging off, going outside, allowing myself to just like lay on a walk around and then like lay on a blanket and not do anything, even like maybe listen to music, but maybe even not that. And just try to like get away from having so much stimulation all the time could be a good help. Lucy asked, unrelatedly, do you think your Star Trek podcast will make sense for people who never watched it? I think so. A big part of the podcast is that I do a recap of every episode in the beginning, and that's like that's like probably half of the podcast is me doing a ridiculous detailed recap, and Mike and I like make each other laugh and talk about the story. So I think if you're someone who like I tend to watch a lot of YouTube videos for things that I haven't like games I haven't played, movies I haven't watched, etc. If I like the person, and I still find it really really interesting. So if you're that kind of person, then yes, I think it would be very accessible. If you're someone who like can't really get into something if you haven't watched it yourself, then probably not. But we talk about a lot of it's like leftist critiques of Star Trek because it does a lot of stuff really well, but it does a lot of stuff very poorly. And so it's we'll say like what happened in the episode and then we'll talk about sort of like our leftist analysis of how it was handled and what themes came through with it. So I think for me, like I do think it's something I could listen to even if I hadn't watched a show and really enjoy it, but I think that's kind of like a personal preference. So hopefully, I'm excited to launch it and hopefully people really like it. We've had a lot of fun doing it for sure. But I need to make time to edit the episodes and get them out. And then we need to get our music together, which is something I'm hoping to do. I'm going to try to take the next 2 weeks off from socializing and see if that helps me get into a better headspace. It just like find better balance, I think, and see if like I feel less exhausted and hopefully I can work on some of these projects and also work on going outside and not being so stuck in my house because it just is so easy for me to not go outside every day and then I'm like, oh, it's been a really long time. Paul said, "I can do it if it's something I've watched or have no intention of watching if I wanna watch it, but haven't I'm usually out." That's how I am too, Paul, often. Um, Although I do find what happens is I'll watch a video for something that I have no intention of watching, but then their analysis makes me want to watch it. So sometimes I'll stop the analysis and go watch it and come back to it. And sometimes I'm fine watching the analysis and then going to watch it, even knowing that stuff. But it just kind of depends. I watched this happened with Climax. I don't know if any of you have seen that movie, but a new YouTuber that I started following had a video about Climax, and I was just gonna watch the video, and then I decided to watch the movie, and I hated the movie, and I had to turn it off, like, a little more than halfway through. I just, like, could not handle it. And so I went back and finished her analysis. But then I was kind of mad because, like, everything she said, I was like, "No, but this movie was terrible," because she was, like, praising the movie. Anyway, that was a movie that, for me, the violence was just absolutely inexcusable and just, like, unbearable, and just seemed to be for, like, the point of being violent, which I can't stand. I can watch some very, very violent movies, but I can't watch, like, people just being evil for no reason, just for, like, shock value. I can't handle that. Oh, Dave. Dave says, "I hear that Star Trek tries to be progressive, and then they bring up Elon Musk as a historical great." Crying emojis. This season of Discovery is a lot of they mean well, I guess. I haven't watched this season of Discovery yet because I've been waiting for it to be done so I can just watch it, like, marathon it. Um, but I'll be interested to see what you're talking about. Discovery is difficult in general for me because it's like I should love it because it's all the representation I've always been waiting for, but it just doesn't have, like, heart and soul to me the way that the older series did. I don't know, I feel like I don't know these people as well and as personally as I've, like, known other crews. And then, yeah, sometimes I'm like, "What are you guys trying to say here?" So, oh, did anyone who wasn't at the watch party, did anyone see the new Matrix? And what do you think? Um, I really enjoyed it. It's extremely meta. And so I think, like, if you I feel that it was a sequel that shouldn't have been made, and Lana Wachowski knew that and was pissed about it. Like, she basically got, like, forced into making it. So she was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna make the most meta commentary about, like, pointless sequels ever." And also some other meta commentary. Um, and I think in that it was really enjoyable, and I think, like, people who walk away feeling that it was a pointless sequel, because I read the reviews, like, after I watched it, and a lot of people were like, "This is a pointless sequel, this didn't need to be made." And I'm like, "Yeah, that was kind of the point, though." Like, I think that's what she wants you to feel. She wants you to walk away and be like, "Oh, we didn't need to do that. Maybe we should stop doing this to franchises." Um, so I really enjoyed it. I might watch it again at some point in my life, but it's not like the original Matrix where I feel like I'm always gonna go back and rewatch it. Um, but I had a good time. So that's my that's my hot take on Matrix Resurrections. Paul said, "I quit on Discovery at the start of season 3, and I feel like I gave it more of a chance than it deserved at that point." Yeah. Paul said, "I'm still not sure what I think about the new Matrix. I liked it well enough while I was watching it with you all, but afterwards, I'm not sure I liked it." Yeah. It was a hard one to kind of, like, analyze, you know? there were parts of it that I really liked, and then there were parts of it that I didn't. Um, and I just think generally, like, for something that I hold so dear to my heart, to see this, like, unnecessary content about it made, even though there was so much, like, commentary about that within it, just feels a bit hollow and a bit sad, I think, for me. Like, if one of the Wachowskis or both of them was gonna make additional Matrix content, I would want it to come out of, like, this deep place of passion and, like, really having something to say. And obviously that's not that's not what we got at all. All right, babes. Well, I think I've cleared my throat and your voice in your ears enough. I'm gonna go, but this was fun. I just wanted to do, I know I expected there wouldn't be many people here today because I know for those who celebrate, it's the day after Christmas and people are probably, you know, recouping and with family. But I thought it'd be fun for those of us who had time and maybe needed a distraction or maybe weren't celebrating to get together and just talk about some fun media. I can make some recommendations and you all can go off and maybe consume some of this stuff today or this week and hopefully have fun and enjoy it. And I would love to hear back from people if you do watch or play or read anything I recommended. If you know, enjoyed it, I would love to hear about it. That would make me happy. And if you want something to someone to talk to about it, I'm here. That's why I'm so excited for this month's, well, technically next month's book club to have people to talk to about Iron Widow because I loved it so much. But yeah, I just want to thank you all for coming to hang out for a couple hours and keep me company and sharing some good stuff and for letting me share my very difficult feelings that I'm working through right now. It's been a long but also very short, very weird year. And I feel very strange about the fact that it's the end of the year. It doesn't feel like it should be. So I think that's part of it. But I'm happy to have such a great community to, you know, talk to about these things. And I think that's part of why I overcommit myself because it's really fun to make content for all of you and with all of you and do, you know, hang out together. So I want to thank you for being part of my existential community where I can be heard and validated in all of my weird feelings. All right, babies. Happy, you know, end of 2021, happy beginning of 2022, whenever I see you next. Thanks for being part of my online family, and I will see you around. Bye, babes.